Hi, I'm Ashley Curallo, sharing my heart, music, and home, and today I want to share my kitchen table redo with you. Our kitchen table is central to our home. As a family who works and schools from home, our kitchen table is used all throughout the day. We eat almost all of our meals here, we do our homeschool here, we do craft projects here, we host company here, and so on. I hope that this project will inspire you to take what you have in your home and make it beautiful. It doesn't take a lot of money to change something up in your home, and often the most beautiful changes require just a little bit of ingenuity, but are actually quite low cost. As a family, we do our best to live frugally and stay out of debt, and by taking what we have and renovating it, we are able to live well within our means. The process that I'm going to show you today would definitely work on a table, and it would also work on just about any other piece of wood furniture. You could take this concept and use it to transform so many pieces in your home and give them a fresh look. The look I'm trying to achieve is a weathered, timeless farmhouse look. I love the look of well-loved and well-worn pieces that have stood the test of time. I'm going for a stripped-down, natural wood look that emphasizes the wood grains. This table was given to us by my parents, and it is a great piece from Ashley Furniture. It's sturdy and well built, but the table just looked a little dated with the honey-hued top and buttery yellow legs. I'm hoping to reveal the beautiful wood grains beneath the heavy finishes and really bring this piece to life. So let's get started. First, let's talk about the supplies that I used. Here's the basic equipment that I used for this project. First, I used a Black Decker electric sander, and really you can use any brand or any variety, it doesn't really matter. That just happens to be what we have. And then I used a variety of those round sandpaper pads that attach to the electric sander. And I think I used, anywhere from 60 grit to 80, 120, then on up to 240 and 320 for the fine sanding. Then I also had personal protection gear just to make sure that the noise of the sander didn't bother my ears. So I had some ear protection muffs, and then also I had safety glasses, very, very important to have those so nothing flies off into my eyes, and then also a sanding mask. And then as far as products go for actually completing the table, I used several finishing wax. I used Minwax dark wax, and I also used Jolie clear wax, and then I also used some clean rags and a wax brush to apply the finishing wax. So that's pretty much it as far as gear goes. I did try a little bit of citrus strip on this project, but ended up not using it, as I will discuss a little bit later. But you could certainly use a stripping agent like citrus strip to speed up the process. So let's talk through the process of sanding this table. So working with the direction of the wood grain, I used my electric sander to completely sand the top of the table. I tried not to bear down on the sander, but rather let the sander do most of the work. And sure, there's a time or two when I had to kind of really get into a stubborn groove or something like that, but I was trying really hard not to make uneven swirls or gouges in the table. The top of the table went fairly quickly, which kind of gave me a false sense of how fast this project was going to go. So I thought, oh yay, I can be done with this in a couple days. Well, not really. Then came the more tedious task of working on the grooved edging and also the legs, which I will be discussing how I tackled those aspects of the table. To all you woodworkers out there who know a lot more about working on furniture than I do, let me just say that I am not a professional woodworker, and I really don't want to invest in more tools at this time. Tools that probably would have done a lot better job and been a lot faster. So I just chose to use what I have on hand to complete this project, even though it meant a probably more labor-intensive process for me and might not have achieved a perfect look, which I really was not worried about. So for the top of the table, I started with an 80 grit. Then I worked my way to successively higher grits to achieve a very smooth tabletop. So I went from 80 to 120, then 240, and then last 320. So let's talk about the table edging a little bit. This was a real challenge for me because of the very deep grooving. At first I thought I could accomplish all the necessary sanding by just using my electric sander, but I quickly realized that that was not going to work, as the sandpaper pads quickly chipped and flew off my sander. Next, at the kind suggestion of my husband, I tried using his oscillating tool with a sandpaper pad just kind of precariously attached. This process unfortunately didn't work very well, and I eventually ruined the head of my husband's oscillating tool, so I am so sorry, Jesse, but he knew this was probably going to happen, and he was okay with that. I did try putting some citrus strip, which, if you're unfamiliar with that product, is kind of a orange goopy looking substance that you can use to remove heavy finishes from furniture. I did put some of that on the edging, and it did its trick. It started eating away at the edging, but it unfortunately left an orange deposit that I was not happy with, because I was not planning on using any type of stain or paint on this project. So I decided the citrus strip was a no-go for this project, at least. So the last and most tedious method, which I was really trying to avoid, worked out best in the long run, which was just simply hand sanding the edges. Impatient me just wanted this project done now, but I realized that just doing the slow and steady process of hand sanding really achieved the best results. So what I did actually is I just took some of the round sanding pads and I just kind of folded them over twice, and then actually just used that to really dig into the grooves of the table. And that seemed to work out really well. So I was able to minimize how much sandpaper I wasted by just reusing some of the sand pads that I had already discarded from sanding the top of the table. I was able to then really maximize the interior part of the sandpaper grit and use that to really focus on the grooving of the table. So now let's talk about how I sanded the table legs. Here again, I just used what I have available to me, which is just my electric sander. This was probably not the right or best tool for this project, and any professional woodworker out there could steer me in the right direction, but the sander got the job done for the look that I wanted. I just wanted a worn, vintage look, especially on the table legs. So I wanted to remove most of the paint, but still have remnants of it left behind to give it just kind of that antique look of a piece of furniture that's been painted over and over again and stripped down and over and over again. So I did my best to work systematically, one section at a time. At first I was definitely a little shaky with the sander, but eventually I got a little better control of the sander and kind of got into a rhythm of how to sand. After all the sanding was done, I know it sounds silly, but I blew the table off with the leaf blower to try to get most of the dust off, and that did the trick and got most of the excess off. And then my husband helped me move the table back into the house since rain was coming that evening, and I decided that I could go ahead and finish waxing the table inside the house. The wax does have a little bit of a smell, but it's a fairly low, what do they call it, VOC level, so it's not extremely pungent like paint or stain. So now let's talk about the final stage of waxing the table. I would have loved the patina of aged wood on the top, but to really properly achieve this effect, that would have required a lot of extra work and a lot of extra playing around with stains and whatnot, and that's just really not something that I want to do right now in my life. So instead, I just opted to use finishing wax for the tabletop and the legs. So before even applying the wax, I first just wiped the table off with a damp rag. I used Minwax Dark Finishing Paste on the tabletop. When I first put the wax on top, I was really worried and about to run out to Walmart to get something different. The wax turned out a different color than I expected, and it kind of brought back more honey hues, which I was really trying to avoid. But after letting it dry for about 15 minutes, the color lightened up a bit, much to my relief. And after getting my husband's opinion, he encouraged me that it looked fine, so I decided just to go with the dark wax. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about applying finishing wax or finishing paste. It really is quite an easy process, and that's part of the reason, well, a huge reason why I love this stuff so much. So if you read the directions on the Minwax jar or can, it says just to use a clean cloth to apply the wax. So I just simply dug my cloth into the jar and kind of really worked a bunch of the wax into the rag. And then taking that rag and working with the grain of the wood, I just apply the wax until an area is fully covered. I like to work systematically, so I like to work in maybe about 1 foot square areas to really ensure complete coverage. So then I just work my way all across the entire table, and then after about 15 minutes, I come back with a clean cloth to just gently buff the wax and to kind of create a little bit more even finish. If you've never used wax before and aren't sure how it responds or behaves, it takes it a relatively short amount of time to dry. So it will not feel wet to the touch or moist to the touch for very long at all. So it will probably dry in maybe even a couple of hours. But the thing about it is it really takes about a week to completely cure per the Minwax instructions. And that is a big temptation because it's easy to want to just jump in and start using that piece of furniture. So it's best not to use that piece of furniture until it's completely cured. Finally, let's talk about how I waxed the table legs. I used clear wax by Jolie, and then I also used a wax brush for this process instead. And I believe my husband just picked the wax brush up for me from Lowe's, and then I ordered the Jolie wax just from Amazon. So they're both easy to source. And really it's quite a simple process. I just dipped my brush into the wax, kind of worked the wax into the brush a little bit, and then just generously applied the wax to every part of the table leg. And then after I had finished applying it with the brush, then I just gently took a clean cloth and then just kind of gently buffed it in, similar to the same process that I used on the top of the table. So here again, it's really quite easy to apply wax to the table leg with a brush. And I probably could have done it with a clean cloth, but I just decided to do it with a brush, which I believe is what the Jolie instructions recommend doing. I know that homemaking can be overwhelming at times. It's easy to want our homes to look different than we want. Just by putting in a little bit of effort, we can do things to make our homes beautiful places and just upgrade them a little bit more with some effort and relatively low cost. You may or may not know that I actually have a website where I regularly blog. I blog weekly on Mondays. And I also sell my own sheet music there. If you are a musician and are interested in sheet music, it's a wonderful place to find some music for personal enjoyment or for a church setting. So I warmly welcome you and invite you to check out my website. It's ashleykirallo.com, and I would love for you to come visit me there. And that's really the best way that you can say thank you to me, is just by visiting my website, checking out my blog posts. I would greatly appreciate your presence there. One more thing that I wanted to share with you. I am starting to upload my music to major streaming services, and so far I have it on Amazon and Spotify, Apple Music, and I would definitely welcome you to check out my music. I have a couple pieces up so far, and you can find links to those at the very top of my webpage, so I would welcome you and invite you to check out my music there. And as time goes on, I hope to have more of my music available for you on major streaming services. Thank you again for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.